Well, okay. I think we have no one waiting at the moment, but we will continue to let people in as they arrive. I want to welcome everybody to this evening's program, a virtual roundtable working with our migrant communities. And this program is being offered in English and Spanish with simultaneous interpretation. So first, I'd like to introduce our translator, Maria Sigourney, who will explain how to use this feature. Maria.
Good evening, everybody. This is Maria Sigourney. I'm going to be interpreting in Spanish. So once the interpretation system is enabled, please find in the bottom right corner an icon that looks like a globe, and then you can choose the language that you need to hear. Buenas noches, yo soy la intérprete para la noche de hoy. Si necesitan escuchar interpretación en español, una vez que esté activada la herramienta de interpretación, pueden buscar en la esquina inferior derecha, va a haber un icono que se ve como un mundo. Pueden hacer clic ahí y pueden buscar el idioma que necesitan escuchar. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Maria. To the audience, please do note that your microphones have been muted upon entry, though you can control your video camera. You can also use the live transcript closed captioning option in English only, which is at the bottom of your screen, and this is provided through AI by Zoom. Should you have any questions or comments, please do type them in the chat. Now, once again, thank you for joining us for working with our migrant communities, a virtual roundtable. I'm Sarah Linda Lichtblau, the Hudson River Museum Assistant Director of Education, and this evening we are excited to host a virtual roundtable with 4 local and regional community leaders who will discuss the ways in which their work is driven by the migrant experience. Panelists include Esmeralda Hoscoy, Regional Director of Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of New York, Professor Vanessa Merton, Faculty Supervisor of the Immigration Justice Clinic of the Elisabeth Haub School of Law at Pace University, Dr. Edwin M. Quezada, Superintendent of the Yonkers Public Schools, and the Hudson River Museum Teaching Artist in Residence, Erika Harrsch. They will shed light on the current state of immigration in our area and how they work with the migrant population. Hudson River Museum Director and CEO Masha Turchinsky will be moderating. This program has been inspired by Border Cantos Sonic Border, Richard Misrach, Guillermo Galindo, which is currently on view at the HRM through May 9th, 2021, with support provided by Art Bridges. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Masha Turchinsky, who will tell us a little about our panelists. Masha?
Thank you so much, Sarah and Linda, and thank you for all the work you have done on the programming during the run of this exhibition. Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening. It's my absolute pleasure to gather such innovative leaders who are thinking deeply about migration, and we're here tonight to hear about their respective roles in this process. And at the end of this, what we hope is not only to hear about the challenges that everyone's facing, but ultimately get to a conversation to discuss how our organizations, those of us on the call and those of us who are interested in not just hearing about these challenges, but what we can do to help. So how can our organizations come together to successfully combat some of the issues that we're facing, and how can we as individuals also contribute to the solutions? So it's my pleasure again to introduce the 4 panelists. I'm going to do some brief introductions, and then I'm going to turn it over to the respective panelists here at the roundtable who can tell us about their current, their role, as well as the challenges and the opportunities that they see in dealing with migration. So I will start with Professor Vanessa Merton, teaches and directs the Immigration Justice Clinic at the Elisabeth Haub School of Law at Pace University in White Plains. And under her supervision, the UC student attorneys provide free legal services to non-citizens who would otherwise not be able to afford this assistance. And for 15 years, Professor Merton has served as Pace Law School's Associate Dean for Clinical Education and Executive Director of the John Jay Legal Services, all while creating and teaching clinics in access to healthcare and whistleblower protection, and also prosecution of domestic violence. She began her career in legal education as a clinical professor at NYU Law School and has received the Excellence in Teaching Award of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, which is the highest honor for an immigration law professor. It's a pleasure to have you here this evening, Vanessa. Dr. Edwin M. Quezada is the superintendent of our Yonkers Public Schools. He is passionate about quality teaching and learning, and he's compassionate about children and their families from all backgrounds and abilities, proud of his humble beginnings and devoted to family and faith. Dr. Quezada moves the agenda of public education in Yonkers, New York, the fourth largest school district in the state, serving almost 26,000 students and employing 3,500 staff. Under his tutelage, in 2020, Yonkers achieved an on-time graduation rate of an incredible 91%, the highest in New York State's Big Five city school districts. And this is the first of this group to achieve over 90%. So equity and diversity are the underpinnings of his work, and we are, and that includes his exceptional work with My Brother's Keeper and providing access to academic, social, and emotional cultural opportunities to every child. So it's a pleasure to have you here this evening, Dr. Quezada. Erika Harrsch, who is currently our teaching artist in residence, is an artist of international renown. So we're very pleased to have you with us, thinking and working with our public. She is currently a New York-based multidisciplinary artist who was born and raised in Mexico City and has also lived in Italy, Germany, and Brazil. Erika Harrsch infuses her work with multi-layered references and narratives concerned with individual and cultural preoccupations, as well as critical political and environmental issues. And I'm going to save the description of your artwork for your own talk, Erika, but I will say it's been a pleasure to follow your work, which has been featured in many solo and group exhibitions at the Denver Art Museum, the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, the Whitney Museum of American Art, el Museo del Barrio, the Museo de Arte Contemporáneo de Querétaro in Mexico, and the Seoul Museum in Korea. And Esmeralda Hoscoy is the Regional Director of Catholic Charity Community Services. And Mrs. Hoscoy directs and develops multiple programs and staff that help individuals and families improve the quality of life and overcome self-sufficiency barriers. She's been doing this work at this capacity for over 10 years, working very closely with families and local governments and coalitions and nonprofit partners. Esmeralda is everywhere throughout Westchester County. You understand the complex challenges, Esmeralda, of those, and you have also, you think about it as well, like others on this call, as someone who has immigrated to America and understand those challenges personally. So it's a pleasure for you, for us to have you with us tonight. So again, a tremendous thank you to all of you. So why don't we start like this? Vanessa, could you please set the stage for us and our audience in terms of what's happening from your perspective, from a legal aid perspective? We have a very serious situation with migration right now. And I know your office is at it every single day, more than there are probably more issues than hours in the day. Can you give us an understanding of what is happening in your world right now? And
So yes, this is a very challenging time. Before I start to describe our own experience, I would like to thank the museum for having presented such an extraordinary exhibit and for organizing and presenting these events in an attempt to educate our larger community about the immigration issues that really are very serious at this time. In reality, of course, for about the last 2.5 generations, immigration policy in this country has been extraordinarily broken and dysfunctional. And however, it is true that it's the last 4 years have amounted to essentially a war on immigrants. And in that war, lawyers and legal assistance providers are sort of the field hospital who are trying to respond to the attacks on immigrants, which take the form, I always describe our work at the clinic, or as you say, we provide free legal services to immigrants, as a form of law enforcement. What we're really trying to do in this clinic is to get the government to follow its own law, to obey its own law. And if the government would do that, we would have many fewer crises in this situation. Because in reality, many of the people, and I'm speaking now primarily of the people at the southern border, because that is the subject of this exhibit. In reality, the majority of non-documented non-citizens in this country did not cross any border unlawfully. They arrived completely lawfully. They overstayed visas. This is often not understood. But in terms of those who cross the border unlawfully, the reality is that if our system were set up the way it's supposed to be, consistent with our obligations under international law, it would be lawful, because many of the people we represent and all of the people who are seeking to regularize their status in this country, in fact, the majority, when represented and when they have an opportunity to go before an immigration court judge or an officer for adjudication, they in fact are able to prevail and to demonstrate that they have a lawful basis for their presence in our country. That's not even to address the contributions that they make economically and socially, which is another subject we might get to. In terms of what the situation with our work, yes, we are overwhelmed. I have two goals with the clinic. One is to train and educate new immigration lawyers, because there is a desperate need. Very few lawyers are competent to function in this field, and that is another part of the problem. And the second part of it, of course, is to provide immediate, if you might call it first aid almost, but to provide immediate service and relief to the many people in our area and our communities. Westchester, many people think of as an affluent community and a fairly homogeneous one, but in reality, about 27% of the residents of Westchester County are foreign born, and that's a very large population who our clinic seeks to serve. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's sort of the overview of what we're confronting. A lot of lawlessness on the part of the government and an attempt to assist people who otherwise would have no possible access to assistance, to make the government follow their own law.
Thank you. That all was very helpful, Vanessa, and does indeed set the stage. And I think this is a really and thank you, Eden, for also for providing that that key statistic that 27% of Westchester residents are foreign-born. I think that dovetails really well into stepping over to Dr. Quezada and talking to him about what's happening in the Yonkers Public Schools that might be indicative, of course, of larger issues that are going on in our country, but we can think locally and then connect it to a more national concern. Dr. Quezada, can you tell us about how you are thinking about the needs of migrant communities on a day-to-day basis in our school and in schooling and education?
So thank you, Masha, and good evening, everyone. And thank you to the Hudson River Museum for putting this panel together and for maintaining the relationship with all of the systems that need to work on behalf of each and every one of our students. As you know, I am an immigrant to the United States that came to this country when I was 50 years old. So for me, this is who I am. This is part of my work. And having sat in bilingual classrooms, like many of my students have, we certainly understand the plight of that we are dealing with, and we will continue to deal with for many years to come. You know, from my perspective as a superintendent, I spend a great deal of time understanding the data more than anything, because I think that's extremely important, because that tells us patterns, and patterns would allow us to devise strategies to support the young people that we are supposed to support, as well as their families. So think about the fact that in the Yonkers Public Schools, we have about 26,000 students, and approximately 13% of them are multilingual learners, or ESL, or ENL students, or TBE, transitional bilingual students. We have so many names for them. Think about the fact that out of those young people, 82% of them are Spanish speakers. So as you know, the majority of the students that are coming to my school systems are coming from countries where Spanish is spoken. When we think about the 5 countries that are where our immigrant students are coming from, the Dominican Republic is at the top of the list with 40% of the students in the district coming from the Dominican Republic. 6% of them are coming from Honduras, 4% are from Ecuador, another 4% from Mexico, and another 4% from El Salvador. So things have changed here in the Yonkers Public Schools. When you look at those numbers, Mexico, Honduras, El Salvador, those are significant percentage of students coming to our schools. And as we well know, those are the young people that are probably crossing the border in order to come to the United States of America. So you know the challenges that they come with. You know, I have always said that when we have so many immigrant students or migrant students in our school system, we also have to understand who they are. So of the students who are in our bilingual program or our transitional or our multilingual learners program, 62% of them are newcomers to our area. What does that mean? That they do not have the basic foundation of the English language. And in most instances, many of them do not even master the Spanish language, which is of great deal of concern. Think about the fact that at least 1% of all the students have been identified as students with formal interrupted education. You know, and that's a tremendous issue for us. And finally, when we talk about our students, you know, 18.8% of the students in the ENL program are students with disabilities as well. So the needs are significant. The challenges are many, but I'm here to continue the conversation, and I'm sure the questions will come up, and I'll be more than happy to respond.
Thank you, Dr. Quezada. And this is a good moment to turn to Esmeralda. Esmeralda, can you please help our audience understand your organization's mandate and what has changed? Has your mandate changed in any way in the past 4 years, in the past year? And I guess I will add to that, how has the pandemic changed your work?
Sure. So Catholic Charities, you know, our work is really founded in being able to support individuals in need and welcoming the stranger. And the stranger often in these days is certainly an individual newly arrived, as Dr. Quezada just described, an individual that just landed in Westchester County. A lot of times, what our agency does is really orient individuals as to where they are and what they might need with basic necessities. Oftentimes when a child arrives or a family enters Westchester County, you know, they often find themselves at the doors of many of our parishes. And many of our parishes then refer their clients right back to us, Catholic Charities. We are the nonprofit arm of the Catholic Church that helps the individuals with our case managers and our social workers. And our job is to delicately inform our clients about what their resources are, where to enroll their children, and what to do next in terms of legal proceedings or connecting with an attorney or a service that they might need. As Vanessa mentioned, you know, there's a lot of individuals that come to the United States and they're coming here to find hope. And our job as Catholic Charities is really to go ahead and introduce them to a lot of the local services, you know, the school systems, the benefits that might be out there for the children. We do the gamut of work in making sure that families feel safe when they arrive here, that they feel that they have a place to go if they have a question about themselves or their children, or even the network or systems around them. One of the things that's changed the most over the last couple of years, unfortunately, has really been the fear that's been created. You know, the negative rhetoric in the media, as well as coming down from our federal government and our executive branch especially, has really forced a lot of our immigrant community to sort of go down under and fear many of the services. You know, for a time there, individuals were hiding, you know, in parishes themselves, you know, at churches, because they feared going out. They feared, not being able to come back home to their families or children. So a lot of our responsibility is not just to make them feel welcome, but also to make sure that they have the resources to then go on to the next step. And many of our clients just come here to really go ahead and find a better life. So we guide them in that path.
Thank you very much, Esmeralda. This is, and again, I know that this is, that your services are needed more than ever during this time.
Thank you.
This brings me over to Erika Harrsch. Now, Erika, I know you operate at the intersection of so much of what has just been talked about. So can you take a moment and tell our audience about how you came to this place? You think about citizens' rights, you think about education, you think about humanitarian aid, and you think about migration very deeply. Could you talk about that for us?
Thank you, and thank you, Masha, and thank you, the museum, for giving me the opportunity to be the artist in residence, and such a pleasure to be with these fabulous people that do very important matters and things for us immigrants and for all the community. So I'm a Mexican-born artist. I migrated, so I'm an immigrant myself 20 years ago to the city of New York. And obviously going through all the conundrums of the immigration process and problems and difficulties made me be very sensitive to all what goes, and to understand precisely, as Vanessa was saying, that not everybody that migrate come here illegally. Because myself, I was about to become undocumented. So I started researching and trying to bring, obviously, into my work, the possibility, the language, the discourse to talk about this and to raise awareness, because a lot of people don't understand the depth of immigration and the depth of the problem, and how there's so many political and legal gaps that actually are part of the equation. So the first project I did, I linked it with a monarch butterfly that does migration from Canada, crossing United States, and then arriving to Mexico for hibernation once a year. So that was the very first project that it linked to immigration, environmental protection, and feminism. The second project I did was the passport of the United States of North America, which is a utopian passport, or North American continent without borders. It's a project that works as a fictitious office where people can come and apply to get a passport. But it actually talks or brings all the iconography and the semiotics about immigration. And it's definitely a criticism to the harshness of the policies and the process that make people be very insecure, almost like worthless, to be legally applying for visa status, a document, and an immigration status. And the third project that I did, and all the projects have branches, let's put it that way. It's a project that talks about detention centers for undocumented minors, and talks about DACA, Dreamers, and the hardship that started at the border in 2014, when there was a massive exodus of undocumented, unaccompanied children. That then it was handled in a very non-necessary correct way that protects humanitarian standards for all these children. So talking about all these projects, addressing in an artistic way that it's not necessarily a very blunt sort of cold presentation about all these immigration gaps and humanitarian issues related. I address the projects in sometimes always very participative, so people immerse themselves into the situation, in the circumstance, in a way of video installation, playful sort of participatory installations, where the viewer or the person that approaches the piece plays with it, immerse themselves in it to have a broader understanding and at least reflect on it and try to research further and possibly the message communicates in a broader way than just getting the news or reading a paper. So my hope with these projects is that I can communicate what happens so people could be more understanding and more supportive in many other ways about their, any single person that they might cross with in their daily lives that could be an immigrant. And that's my purpose. I'm not necessarily an activist, but in a way I'm a visual activist that raise awareness of these topics and people could have a better understanding.
Thank you. And from what we've seen, what I think is remarkable about your work is the way that those who encounter it are able to put themselves in the mental space and sometimes even imagine themselves in that space without judgment, right? Or learning to not have past judgment on those who have experienced migration. No one is guaranteed in life that they will not experience migration. People experience migration at all different times and for all different reasons. And many people who thought it would never happen to them have found themselves in these situations. So what I think would be helpful to all, and by the way, I will mention to those who are following along, it's nice to see a very full room for this talk, is that you may put questions into the chat and we will do our best to address those. Vanessa and everyone, we can jump in here. Knowing that, I know in one past conversation when I said, what's the workload like? What's the volume of calls for help like? The one word you used was tsunami. But so I have a question for the four of you on the call. What do you think the four of you and the various entities you represent can do together to improve the situation for migrants? I know you do a lot on your own, but where would you think would be the best way to reach out to each other? What kind of collaborations do you think would be most beneficial? Who would like to answer that first?
Well, I can say one thing that would make a huge difference would be, for example, if the resource allocation with the federal government, as everybody I guess understands, has almost complete jurisdiction over all matters of immigration. So it really is a question that the state, the city, and certainly, as Dr. Quezada reminds us, the school districts can do a tremendous amount to affect the quality of life of immigrants who are in the process of trying to regularize their status. But it's the federal government that has to act to make our immigration law, which is currently a crazy, deranged, dysfunctional mess, into a simple, clear, coherent operating system, and put resources into the adjudication of many, many valid claims. I sometimes is so surprising to realize that, people talk about a nation of immigrants. People talk about their own ancestors, their own history, as if they came here in some magically different way. But in reality, there were no laws. There were no barriers of the sort that confront immigrants today. And there are definitely requirements that I think make sense, but what we have right now does not function. And that alone would just rationalize the process in a way that would be befitting a democracy.
Thank you for bringing that up. And maybe to spark an idea, the museum has installed a wall as part of the Border Cantos Sonic Border exhibition where we say, share your migration story. And it has been filling up day by day. The wall just gets more and more full. And to your point, Vanessa, people are sharing stories of great-grandparents, grandparents, sometimes themselves, right? Some of these stories are very poignant, some feel triumphant, some are, certainly, they're all memorable. But you're right that just because your grandparents came in at a certain time, it was not like a magical era where there was a wand that said, you did it the right way and someone else did it the wrong way. It's just that the game was different. right? So Dr. Quezada, if you could reach out and seek assistance or collaboration with the other people on this call or other organizations like them, what is it that you think would help you and your constituents, your students and their families the most?
So let me say first of all that we do have a great deal of relationships with organizations that are working on behalf of our migrant children. I mean, we have been working with Catholic Charities for many years. And as a matter of fact, they have a place with us at the Adult Education Center. So, and they are there on a regular basis, providing the kind of support that Professor Merton is describing. So we might not be able to change the federal policies in the near future, as the professor describes as one of the most dysfunctional systems in the history of our world. And it's going to take a lot of work for us to change that. However, there are many things that we can do together. First of all, I think we need to educate the larger community. It begins there. We need to strive to change the mindsets of many of the individuals that are responsible for working with our children. And for me, it's about addressing all the implicit bias that come with being a migrant in our community. You know, acceptance it's something that is not so welcome most of the time. So systems need to change on behalf of these young people more than anything. And that's what I want to see. I want the system to work towards supporting them just like we support any other population in the educational community. We have an adult education program that is servicing so many adults, so many families. We need to expand those opportunities and we need to open the doors and we need to communicate to the families that in this center, La Migra will not come by. They will not be welcome there. But we need to do better at communicating that message to our families. Similarly, in our schools, you know, we know that that if you just travel 3 months to cross the border, you know, we need to work on your social emotional state before we expect you to learn how to read and write. And we don't do enough of that. So there is so much that we can do together. But first, let us understand the data, and then let us partner with any organization that wants to work not only for the young people, but also for the families, because they are in a very difficult state, particularly when I am the uncle of a child that just appeared in my home, because I am the closest family to that young person. I don't know who this young person is. This young person comes with significant challenges, and now I'm responsible for that adult. So for that young person. So that adult needs a great deal of support as well. And we as a community, as a system, need to create the space for that to happen.
That's such a good point. And you know, the fact that you bring up youth, of course, that you center on youth and education reminds me of, and perhaps Viridiana Garcia Choi, who is in the conversation, who oversees our junior docent program and our youth programs, will put in the chat a link. We have an upcoming talk for teens to discuss issues of migration. And I think you get to the heart of the matter when we start to educate the next generation, right? And inform them, because they are interested, they are active, they are perceptive, and it is part of their lived experiences. And so they can speak to it, and they are also the ones who will help us make change. So Viri, if you wouldn't mind putting that link in the chat when you have a moment. Esmeralda, what I'd like to ask you about is some of the, again, I'd like to pose the same question to you in terms of ideas for partnerships. A lot of times the members of our audience want to find ways. By the end of an hour, they say to themselves, well, what can I do to help? I know that in the past we have talked about one of the interesting challenges that comes with migration is the situation of mixed household status. And that is that someone might have been born here, but a parent might not. Even in a nuclear family, one parent may have a different status than another. Can you talk about that and some things that maybe have come, any ways that issue manifests itself in other ways?
Sure, yeah. Well, like any family, right? It's very different in the household, and mixed household families. We see a lot of. A lot of the families that are in the United States have been here for a long time. So naturally, they have children here, and children who can access and get a lot of assistance and go ahead and grow. And in terms of the mixed household statuses, there's a lot of fear and lack of education within these families when it comes to resources that may be available to them. I must say that here in Westchester County, I feel very blessed to say that there's lots of different partnerships, anything from a museum, Hudson River Museum, to being able to contact or connect with the Department of Social Services, or even contacting a public school official to say, hey, there's this family that has an issue. Oftentimes, we find at Catholic Charities that our mixed household families, are fearful of coming forward for benefits. And this goes across the range, right? We've had families that have individuals that have children that are disabled, and accessing those services. There's lots of rich services for these individuals. And sometimes it's just a fear, back in their home country, in their government, these services do not exist. So a lot of it is letting them know that there are opportunities and lots of different resources, letting them know that there is a trusted individual or source. Back in their home country, a lot of times that's not the case. There's not these strong systems. Having a public library as vibrant and young as Yonkers might not exist in their home country. Mm-hmm. So, and as we know here, individuals can access the library and have access to the internet, a computer, books to let them know where they need to do or what they need to do next, applications for DSS, activities for after school programming. So there's all of these connections that are often missing only because of that fear. And that fear comes really dug deep from the history of them crossing, from the injustices that they faced back home. So a lot of the work is really in the mental health and trying to open these families up to knowing and informing that they have a lot of access, and they have opportunities here for their children as well as themselves. Not only do we have to focus on the child, but of the parent that is now here. And one of the biggest things that we try to always do, especially in Yonkers, we have a strong day labor program where we focus on making sure that parents, day labor men who now work in the construction field or do a lot of repairs or home repairs, that they are educated individuals, that they get their OSHA training, that they understand the laws of this country so that they can really go ahead and be successful. And that makes the entire family successful. So we try to focus on both, but mixed household status is something that we see a lot. And that is probably the majority of the type of client that we get, although it does vary by season and by time. We in the summertime, we do get a lot of individuals that are newcomers, and they're here to sort of make sure that they are working and that they are getting ahead. And we're here as a resource. So we have to make sure that we're connecting those two, right? From adults to children and within our community.
No, thank you, Esmeralda. And again, these are, you bring up, again, even more points I'm seeing. Thank you. I see that Edwin has put in a wonderful mention, a reminder to everyone about the adult education program. As part of the organization of this exhibition, Border Cantos Sonic Border, the museum reached out to numerous organizations in Westchester County, and we created an open resource page that is up here in the chat. Sarah Linda has put in the link, but this is a resource page for organizations to reach out, certainly to everyone on this call, but listing the Yonkers Public Schools and Catholic Charities and legal aid, food pantries, where to sign up for help. Vanessa, what is one of the, would you say, what is one of the, I guess one of the greatest misunderstandings by someone in a precarious migration status, or what they perceive? Is there something that you would like to convey to someone about reaching out, how they should reach out, how you can help them? I think a lot of people who might be on this call know someone, they themselves or someone they know might need help. What would you say is what's the best first step for them?
Okay, well, before I respond to that, I wanted to take advantage, if I may, to put a question to Dr. Quezada, because I don't always get to talk with educational leaders in our school system. I think when you talk about misunderstandings on the part of the immigrant community, I want to take a step back and talk about misunderstandings on the part of the non-immigrant community, and in particular about two things, two subjects which I wish that my students who arrive at law school had learned about in high school. One of them is really the history of the United States direct intervention in the countries of Central America over the last 100 years in ways that have been absolutely caused a great deal of the suffering and the injustice and the fear and terror that people are escaping when they come to this country. And so that we can understand and own our responsibility for the welfare of these people, that it is not, we are not being charitable here. We are really in a process of making reparations for a very dark history. That's one thing I wish that was taught in school. But the other thing that is more responsive, Masha, is that so many people in the immigrant community are honest and trusting themselves, and they are so easily taken advantage of and ripped off. And I regret to say that one of the primary ways in which that happens is by people who are pretending to offer them legal assistance and legal advice. I saw you mention the VIV school. Our clinic does workshops, has done several workshops at the VIV school and many other schools and places of worship and community centers here in Westchester for open to immigrants with different languages, competencies, presenting basic information to try to keep them from getting scammed and ripped off. And it's not just that their money is stolen, it's that they are put into very perilous positions by the bogus, nonsensical claims that are filed on their behalf, and they have no way, no access to information. They're not taught what is real about their possible options. So that is an important thing that is coming. If there is any positive change from my point of view, any greater rationalization in our federal policy, one of the sad aspects of that, it's happened during the Obama administration and many times before, is that there will immediately be more scam artists and more, especially using the internet and using WhatsApp and using other social media and telling people that they can, you know, get your green card here, it's easy, it's no problema, and so forth. And they are not getting access to accurate, competent advice and understanding what they need to do to qualify. So that's a set of misunderstandings that I would love to see our school system invest in even greater information for the public.
I think you make a good point, very valid point that you're making, Professor Martin. You know, it's and you are accurate in your response in terms of the misunderstanding that comes to the migrant community that from those of us who are here in the system. And that's the point that I'm trying to make, that there is so much implicit bias and disrespect and lack of appreciation for them that it leads others to further disrespect them. And that's the point that I'm trying to make on behalf of all of our immigrants, because it's not just those who are recent arrival. I think it's affecting all of them here in Yonkers. And it becomes incumbent upon us, the educators, not only to educate those who have newly arrived, but also those who are here, who are claiming to be interested in servicing them. And that's what we do in the adult education program here. We welcome them, we receive them with love, we provide services, and we give them a place and we give them a voice so that they feel comfortable in our educational system.
Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Quezada. And I know I know that you might have another important meeting to attend. So just for everyone on the call, if Dr. Quezada suddenly his box goes dark, it is because he was gracious enough to give us his time tonight, as well as another meeting that is happening probably momentarily. So I want to say thank you, by the way.
Thank you for the transition, March, and thank you, everyone. And remember, you know, we are open for business for all of our students, and we welcome everyone who wants to intentionally support these young people. The challenges are many, but it begins with us making the change. So let's change mindsets so that more and more students who are experiencing difficulties and who are coming to us brand new from another country, let's open the doors for them. It's not their fault, particularly when you are a young person. They have nothing to do with this new experience that they are faced with. So let's welcome them, let's take care of them, let's educate them, and let's give them a voice. Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Quezada. Erika, now I'm personally very excited about your upcoming project, and we put the link in the chat so that people can prepare for it. I want to ask you, as I guess one is a question about your past experiences with the projects you have done and dealing with this topic of migration. Is there one particular story or one experience or one reaction to one of these projects, for example, the Passport Project, that you would like to share that really changed you, that informed the way you work? Is there something that has stood out, and maybe help us understand that if we come and take part in this project, what to expect?
Absolutely. Well, I invite everybody to come and participate in the Passport, United States of North America Passport Office that would take place Saturday 24th at the museum. Everybody can come and apply for a passport, spin a wheel of fortune, and possibly go out of the experience with a physical passport, which is an art piece, and it's obviously a fictitious passport. Obviously, when this project has been presented internationally, many different contexts, countries, different scenarios. It could be in a museum, in a street art fair, in a street, in a sort of pop-up passport office in the context of a urban scenario, in the main street of a city, or which I did it also at El Paso, in the El Paso street, few steps next to the Santa Fe Bridge, which is one of the biggest daily crossing for people in between Mexico and US, Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua, and El Paso, Texas. Obviously, as all the panelists informed, misinformation is one of the crucial circumstances for the immigration conundrum. So me as an artist doing these projects, I have the responsibility to bring information for people that approach and get into asking questions. So in my very humble, I would say, format, I try to give people information about, or links or possibilities to get help if they need so, if they know someone to get to get more information. Obviously, when these installations happen, the people complete the actual installation. They complete the format of the art piece precisely by their participation. So sometimes, obviously, it's overwhelming the completion of this piece, how the activation of this creates a future for the pieces that go out of my scope, like what happened in El Paso, Texas, that the piece was right next to the border. So some people thought that we were La Migra, some people thought that we were actually going to facilitate the possibility of people to getting a passport. We always inform that this is an art piece, that we're just there to open the commentary and to create, to raise awareness, and people exchange. So the piece becomes almost like, I would say, like a hopeful scenario where people apply for that and start to see possibilities of maybe being able to get their own status stabilized or followed. So in this playful matter, people feel the possibility to actually get it. It doesn't matter the social, cultural, economic background. everybody feels in the need of either getting a status or being able to go to other countries or being able to stay in this country. So information is crucial. The hope is crucial, because all these projects, the way I do them is always with a sense of hope that I can at least share that possibility with the viewer, with the participant. So yes, I mean, it's always overwhelming to learn or to get stories shared with all the participants. It doesn't matter. It was done in China, it was done in Poland, it was done in different states in United States, in Mexico, and Europe, in many different countries. So it always brings so much information, so rich information of the need of migration, the need of, we're in a world of global mobility, that people move because of their needs to work, to survive. You know, it doesn't matter what's your original need or your circumstance. There's always this need of being regular. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I know, and you're right. And there are compelling reasons why people move, and often they are. Someone at the museum had a very good point one day and said that many people would be very happy to stay where they were born, that they should have the right to stay where they are, and that it's the circumstances that are imposed on people that make it to get to the point where you contemplate leaving what you know to do something else. So I do hope that everyone sees the link that we placed in the chat and participate and be part of Erika Harsch's project. It's her work is absolutely stunning, but it's even better when you take part. And now
could I say something, Masha?
Absolutely, I hope you will.
I just want to say, Erika, you know, one of the things I most appreciate and value about this project is that it also brings home, I think, to people the absolute arbitrariness of the fact of where you were born, where you were happen to be, what piece of land, which might also change even during your lifetime, what country it is part of, the reality, the artificiality of borders, and also the point that you make, we allow everything else migrates, you know, corporations can go anywhere in the world and do anything they want anywhere. There are very few limits, and but you know, capital, money, wealth, all of that flows over the borders with absolutely no impediment. But people, we believe we have to fight against and defend ourselves against people of our own species or other people who are simply living in the world in the same way that we are trying to live.
Correct. The birthright citizenship, you know, like the touching with the passport, the factor of luck, you know, that some were born in a certain country, that precise just by chance, that would give them opportunities and possibilities than others that were born in other countries, or that they were born in a country that suddenly turns into war and they have to flee. You know, that kind of displacement, people don't understand that they were having a life that it was normal and settled, and suddenly they have to flee because of war or other circumstances. So yes, it's just a matter of luck. It's a circumstance that when we are born, we're already in a predetermined setup of circumstances that give people the possibilities or the opportunities that others don't have. So all those things are, all those factors and all those ideas are approached, and they are presented in my projects for people to understand how lucky they could be or they don't. And the project appeals to a fact of chance and luck.
Yes, which I think will be very interesting for those of us who participate in that element of fortune, right? And how you land. First of all, Vanessa, I would say it's been very interesting to hear about the fact that there are simply not enough immigration lawyers. I think that is something that's a key takeaway that we need to be letting young people know as they rise through the ranks and think about what they're going to focus on, and that their lived experiences could inform immigration policy as they go forward. I think I'm really struck by what you said there. we're getting some questions in the chat, and I got a few private ones. People saying, I want to help. What can I do? So Esmeralda, I'm going to turn to you for a moment. If someone turns to me at the Hudson River Museum and says, or says to Catholic Charities, I want to help. I don't want to feel powerless. I don't want to just read about this in the news. I want to do something. What would you recommend that they do? Yes,
so I would say become an advocate, right? Become an advocate. And there's so many different types and areas to do that. A lot of individuals can mobilize to advocate for whether that be policy, right? And getting involved in that. If they want to do something in their community, I welcome them to go ahead and certainly check in with us. Certainly, we always have a need, whether that be to accompany a client to immigration court pre-COVID, whether that be to go ahead and orient a family, taking them by hand to the Yonkers Public School District to enroll a child that has newly arrived, whether that be helping us pack a bag of food for the families that do not qualify for any of the existing public benefits. Many of the undocumented individuals do not qualify for public benefits that might be available. Their children might, but they themselves not. I spoke about day laborers. Many of them have families here, but they themselves do not qualify. So there's food pantries available if you want to do something direct. We always have opportunities to get involved in our advocacy work. We certainly have lots of partners at the table throughout the county that there is something that we can do together to mobilize, to help advance and help protect these communities that currently, unfortunately, still have this embedded fear over the last 4 years. While there's a sense of hope in the air, the reality is that the 4 years that they just went through with ICE raids or lack of information, and now with the pandemic on them, there's a lot of repair that needs to be done with these families. And there's a lot of opportunities for volunteers, for individuals to become advocates, whether that be even sending out a Twitter towards a policy, towards a senator, towards anyone to go ahead and advance policy that might be at the federal level. There's a lot that individuals can do. Mobilize and help us mobilize together to really go ahead and change things, not just at the local level, but federally.
Thank you.
Vote, vote, vote.
Thank you, Vanessa.
That's very important. And vote, and not just vote in every 4 years in the big presidential, but remember how important the local voting is. The impact on local voting is cannot ever be overstated. Right.
I sent Olivia a very comprehensive list of all the organizations that are operating in Westchester right now, many of whom could benefit from volunteers, from contributions, as well as the kind of participation that Esmeralda is describing. So if you are interested, take a look at that list and get in touch with some of those organizations.
Vanessa, one pointed question. If you, is there a question from the audience, a policy? Can you name a particular policy or two that should be supported at the federal level that you would encourage people to delve more deeply into or be aware of?
Well, first of all, I think a very simple low-hanging fruit would be to get legislation regularizing DACA, or the Dreamers. The Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals is the acronym is DACA. These are people who came to this country when they were under a certain age. They've been living in this country for at least almost 10 years, or in some cases, many more years. They cannot have a criminal record. They must have completed school, et cetera, et cetera. There are many requirements. There are almost 3 million qualified people who, if the DACA program could be legislated and not operate under this very erratic administrative process that has gone back and forth over the last years, that's a very simple, clear, basic fix that could be enacted tomorrow. But the problem, I think, is that very few people vote whatever they may believe and think about immigration policy. Very few people actually support candidates based on their understanding and commitment to immigration reform. It just doesn't seem to be the issue that people focus on. So that's why I stress that, because until political leaders believe that the public, that voters care about immigration and want to see a rational system in place. Until that happens, we're not going to make much progress, and we're going to continue destroying people's lives, and by the way, wasting a colossal amount of federal taxpayer money.
Thank you.
And
So
I would say, Masha, that to Vanessa's point, a lot of these individuals that, could benefit from the changes in these policies were what we called, essential workers, individuals that throughout this pandemic supported, cleaned, opened and delivered groceries, continued to provide these critical services that we
took care of children, took care of the elders.
Exactly. Individuals clearly that we value as a society, yet we forget about them when it comes to government policies and changes. So I think we need to stress that among people. We clearly have, the pandemic has shown that they are critical, that they are needed. We need to give them that opportunity and path to citizenship so that they can truly be enriched and provide and go in even further. I think that migrants have done an absolutely amazing job at going and being vibrant and participating in our community. And that's under the, being under the title of undocumented or legal. Imagine if they were, the even bigger contributions that they might make.
Absolutely, it's amazing points. Yes, I have another chat. I just want to address two things. I want to say something that for everyone just to think about. You might take it for granted, but maybe pass it on to someone who might need to hear this. When you come to a museum, we do not care about your status. And so I think that's very important for people to know that, right? There's that museums, not just the Hudson River Museum, but any museum, and certainly libraries and so many other organizations. When you come in the door, that is not our concern. Our concern is that you're here, that you're with us, that you've crossed over the threshold, and you're with us, and we're very happy that you're with us. So I want to just mention that. I also want to answer a question, and if I don't have the answer right now, I will get the answer. The question is, I'm so excited that people have this interest about the Teen Talk coming up on Saturday. The question is, will this be in Spanish? I'm already seeing that someone from New Rochelle wants to join, and some other districts want to join, and they want to know if we could have it in Spanish. So I will find out that answer, and if it's not explicitly mentioned in the program listing, then we will answer that question. Here's the good thing, it's amazing. As Dr. Quezada said, with so many students who are in our school district, and same in New Rochelle and other districts in Westchester, that conversation can not only be bilingual, but multilingual. There are a lot of young people who very proudly wield multiple languages and are able to fluidly do that, or proficiently do that back and forth. So I think I can very safely say that yes, that it will be bilingual or multilingual, because that's who our young people are, and they're very proudly so, and we're proud to have those conversations in multiple ways. But we will indeed, and I'm seeing that a few questions here from Frances Cruz, a former junior docent herself, so I'm thrilled to see when a junior docent alum comes back in and participates in the conversation. I look at our time. I'm sensitive to everyone's time this evening and how generous you have been. Esmeralda Hoscoy, thank you. Vanessa Merton, thank you. And Erika Harrsch, thank you. We're really looking forward to your project. Every one of you has added incredible links and resources here. So we have created a resource page that has compiled many different organizations. You can save this chat here, and we will be following up with additional links as we come back and communicate out more what's happening. But please take a look at the Border Cantos Sonic Border page. The page is completely bilingual, as is the exhibition. When you come to the museum, every label is in English and Spanish. The interpretation throughout is in English and Spanish, and of course, many of the programs that we have been doing. So I want to say thank you to all of you, and certainly to Dr. Quezada, for just a really, a very compelling and I would say productive conversation, but also thank you all for giving us not only the practical tips, but ways that we can step forward and not just bemoan what we think is unfair and unjust, but actually step forward and do our part to make it better. So thank you to all three of you. We look forward to seeing all of you at the exhibition. And before we sign off, one last thing is please share your migration story. Please come to the museum or send it to us and let us know your personal or your family's migration story. This will become part of a much larger story. And we're really excited to know who you are, because that makes us who we are. So on behalf of the Hudson River Museum and with a warm thank you to all of our guests, thank you for joining us this evening, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.